Officer Amanda Moreland from the Hampton Police Division and the Public Information Office, and we're here to talk about the first African-American officer here at Hampton PD. The topic this month is Black History Month, which is celebrated nationwide. So I think that the history here at the Hampton Police Division is important, and I'm hoping you guys can share some stories with us.
I agree with that. We're delighted to be here this morning.
So today I have with me the daughters of the first African-American officer at Hampton PD, which was Officer George Hinton.
And I am Gwendolyn Hinton Newsom.
And you are?
I'm Dorothy Hinton Garner, and I was born and raised, I remember just a few months of Aberdeen, mostly. I was raised off of Shell Road in Hampton.
Okay.
And the only job I ever remember my father having was as a police officer for the city of Hampton. So that's my dad. He was a police officer.
That's so nice.
In my memory.
So tell me a little bit about your dad. When was he born?
Dad was born the day after Christmas, December 26, 1914.
And tell me a little bit about your dad's upbringing. Was he born and raised here in Hampton?
Dad was born in Surrey County, but his family, when he was a baby, moved to the city of Newport News, and he grew up in Newport News.
Okay. Do you know where he went to school?
Yes. He finished, I'm not sure about the elementary school, but he finished, it was Old Huntington High School.
Okay.
And it is now located on 16th Street, right off 16th Street and Marshall Avenue. And he graduated in 1935, and his sisters went there too. And my mom graduated in 1935. They were classmates.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we're here to talk about your father's career here at
Sure.
the Hampton Police Division. And I know that he was hired in 1950,
Yes.
February 1st, 1950.
Yes.
And you mentioned a little bit that he was a longshoreman before he became a police
Yes,
officer.
he was a longshoreman, and he also worked in the Newport News shipyard for a while.
What led him to become a police officer? Do you know?
He was always a very adventurous type, and he noticed that it was two Afro-American guys on the Newport News police office department before that, Mr. West and Mr. Patterson. And I think he talked to them, and they gave him heads up and said, "George, why don't you check him out in Hampton?" And he did. And one day I was in the 7th grade when he was hired, and back then in elementary school, all the students were prompt to bring news articles to class every day and report on it and analyze it to the class and tell them about, interests. And one of my classmates, he's deceased now, Warren Hunter, said, "Gwendolyn's father was hired as the first African-American on the Hampton Police Force," and I turned blue or red. I was embarrassed, but I was very, very proud of that. We were always proud of Dad. And all the kids at school and in the neighborhood knew we were the cop's daughters and the cop's son.
I know that when your father was hired, there were only 10 officers here at the police department.
And they were all guys.
And they were
all men.
They were all men. You had mentioned before when we talked before that your father was a mentor or a kind of a field training officer to our now former Chief Minetti.
Yes, he was. He taught him. He orientated him to the police department.
Okay.
And he walked the beat with Dad, and Dad showed him, around in the neighborhood and introduced him to people and showed him some things, do's and don'ts about the department and about the community. He looked up to him.
He also became a sergeant.
Yes, he
believed
did.
to be the first sergeant.
He retired as a sergeant on the detective force.
You had told me a story last week about how your father and one of his partners had a large arrest of 20 or 30
yes,
people. Can you tell me about that?
It was some people in Hampton doing some things they shouldn't have been doing in the house. And Dad was on his beat somewhere near Lee's Corner and Queen Street in Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
And he called for backup before he announced somewhere in front or on the side of the house with his bullhorn. Come out with your hands up. Your house is surrounded. And it was only Daddy out there. And a few minutes later, the other police officers joined him for backup. But that was funny. And it was a joke to the guys. It really was.
Yeah, you provided a newspaper article that actually told that story. So what type of impact did your father's career have on you?
Okay, Evelyn?
As I said, that's the only job, a profession I ever remembered my father being affiliated with.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were raised as the children of a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
It opened doors for us.
Did?
Teachers, ministers,
Mm-hmm.
people, whether at the college level or the high school level, etc., they knew of our father. He was the first. He was the constable. And they seemed to be proud of Hampton and to be affiliated with that. But I think all of us in the family, we walked a little taller.
Mm-hmm.
We recognize you are a Hinton.
Mm-hmm.
Represent. I would see my dad on the job many times. I worked any job I got as a teenager, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a student at Hampton Institute, summer jobs, weekend jobs, that type of thing.
That's true.
Dad, it was some businessman, white, Asian, black, whatever
Mm-hmm.
color. Dad was colorblind.
That's true.
He was colorblind, and his reputation covered the gamut.
So would you say that your father's career had a positive impact on your life?
Absolutely.
Yes.
What about your family
Absolutely.
moving forward, your children?
Yes. I've not been blessed with children, but I have many blessings because
Yes.
of my marriage to Alfred Garner.
Yes.
And they will tell you I always stress education.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sounds
what
like
did
that was
Dad used to
important.
say? Dad used to say, luck. He would tell someone, son, luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Absolutely.
Be prepared.
What type of impact do you feel like your father's career had on maybe your friends?
My friends knew my nickname is Bunny, and they knew don't do anything wrong with Bunny. Don't try anything with her. That would be the guys
boys,
talking.
the boys.
Because Bunny's father is a cop, and they all respected that, and my teachers did too. Yeah.
And I have some tales to tell. Things that Dad kept things close to the vest. Things, cases he worked on, jobs things affiliated with police
Yes.
work.
Yes.
But I was astounded a couple of years ago, all these years later,
At a class reunion.
at a class reunion.
Mm-hmm.
His classmate of mine sitting there with his wife, and we're all retired now. We're sitting around and about 20, 30 strong. We meet, in fact, it's Phoenix High School, and alumni of Phoenix High School. And we meet each month at different local restaurants to just for fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
And Stacy Hobson, I'm going to mention his name. Stacy Hobson sitting there. He's saying,
like
"Dot,
that.
did Dad ever tell you about a run-in I had with him? When I was a teenager?" I said, "No. What are you talking about?" He says, and he mentions another teenager's name that I recall, and he said we got into a scuffle.
Mm-hmm.
Had a real beef between the two of us. We couldn't stand each other. Finally, it became physical. And somebody's sister ran to get Dad, and this had occurred right there in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Dad throws on he would run out the door. How many times with domestic
That any
issues
neighbor
and this
called
and
when
that,
there was any
they would run.
disturbance.
Except there was no 911.
No.
They would go and get the constable. Dad goes down there, breaks up the fight, tells them, and these are two rambunctious young teenagers, late teens, whatever, and they are really tussling. He
And they
breaks up
needed
the
discipline.
fight, And he counsels them. He didn't want to hear about it anymore. Shake hands, guys. You know, make friends. And then Stacy says he put his arms around. Dad was a large man. He puts his arms around each one's shoulders and said, "Boys, shake hands." And they shook hands. And then he took their heads in his hands and knocked the heads together.
That was funny.
And I was astounded when Stacy told me this. I said, he said, "Your daddy did that, and believe me, it worked." It was settled.
Their decorum settled.
It was settled.
Wow.
But I think Dad must have been channeling John Wayne or whatever when he did that.
So is there anything that you would like our viewers to know about your father and his career here at the Hampton Police Division?
Oh, well, he worked hard. Sometimes he would work a first shift, and then if he was needed, he'd work a second shift. Then on Wednesdays, he had traffic court, and all of that. I mean, he worked really hard.
I think he was the epitome of a police officer.
Yes.
And he was so proud of the position that he had achieved.
He revered his job. And the guys, they got along. They liked him. They visited us sometime. And some of the guys visited him, you know, when he was developing his pictures in the dark room. Yeah. And another hobby he really liked was gardening. When we lived in Aberdeen and also on Hannah Street right off Shell Road, he always had a nice big vegetable garden and fruit garden, and he shared it with the neighbors.
Oh, that's so
At
nice.
no cost to the neighbors. And everybody. It was a different day then, Mom.
I've got to mention this.
What, baby?
I never once and this, like I said, my dad was a police officer. It's, you know, that's the only profession I ever knew him to have. I never once remember him calling in sick. Never. He modeled that for all of us.
Yes, he did.
He summer, fall, winter, spring, flu, bronchitis, whatever. He never once called in sick.
Right.
So it sounds like your father was the ultimate community police officer.
Yes, he was. We were very, very proud of him. And so was the community.
Good.
They looked up to him.
Well, thank you so much for coming here and taking the time to share your stories and your father with us.
Certainly, certainly.
And thank you for the sacrifices that your family made so that your father could pave the way for other officers.
Yes.
Thank you.